Hey there, incredible listeners. You always choose the most inspiring stories, and today you're in for something truly eye-opening. Imagine being the CEO of a successful company, thinking everything is running smoothly, until you realize that behind the scenes, things aren't as they seem. That's exactly what happened to Lucas, a leader who went undercover in his own business and discovered a shocking reality. But instead of ignoring the problem, he took action in a way that changed everything. Stay tuned for a powerful story about justice, leadership, and how one decision can transform countless lives. Lucas Bennett sat in his spacious corner office staring at the growing pile of employee complaints on his desk. Just a few years ago, his regional hotel chain Horizon Suites was known for its high standards, excellent customer service, and employee-first culture. He had built the company from the ground up, expanding from a single boutique hotel to over a dozen locations across the state. Guests raved about the warm, welcoming atmosphere, and his employees once took pride in working for a company that treated them well. But lately, something had changed. Reports of overworked staff, mismanaged shifts, payroll issues, and even toxic leadership had started surfacing, and the number of complaints was only growing. Lucas had brought his concerns to his executive team, expecting serious discussions on how to fix the problem. Instead, he had been met with excuses and dismissals. It's just a few disgruntled employees, they had told him. People always complain, but the numbers are fine. They insisted the hotels were running efficiently, that minor issues were inevitable in a growing business. But Lucas wasn't convinced. He knew his business inside and out, and something didn't feel right. If it were just a few isolated complaints, he might have let it go, but the sheer volume of negative reports told him otherwise. He had spent years cultivating a company culture based on fairness and respect, and the idea that employees were being mistreated under his leadership made him uneasy. Was it just one or two bad managers, or had the entire company's values been compromised? He couldn't sit in a boardroom and figure that out. He needed to see it for himself. That's when Lucas made a bold decision. He would go undercover, not as a guest, where staff would be on their best behavior, but as an entry-level employee working behind the scenes. He wanted to walk in their shoes, experience the long shifts, and see firsthand how employees were treated when management thought no one was watching. With the help of a professional disguise team, Lucas would become Greg Lawson, a middle-aged man looking for work in hotel maintenance. No executive privileges, no special treatment, just another new hire trying to earn a paycheck. His destination? One of the company's busiest hotels, rumored to have staffing issues and a demanding manager. If something was broken in the system, he would find out soon enough. And once he did, he would make things right, no matter the cost. Lucas Bennett knew that if he wanted to truly understand what was happening in his hotels, he had to fully commit to his new identity. With the help of a professional disguise artist, he transformed into Greg Lawson, an unassuming middle-aged man with graying hair, thick glasses, and a slightly hunched posture. His usual tailored suits were swapped for a faded maintenance uniform, worn-out work boots, and a cheap wristwatch. Even his mannerisms changed. He slouched slightly when he walked, spoke in a lower, more hesitant tone, and moved as if he were just another worker trying to keep his head down. Since Lucas rarely visited his hotels in person, at least not without prior notice, most of his employees had only ever seen him in polished company newsletters or press conferences. No one at the Meadowbrook Horizon Suites location, the hotel he had chosen for his undercover investigation, would recognize him. He had carefully selected this branch because it was one of the highest-earning hotels in the company. Yet, employee complaints about poor management and exhausting shifts were higher than ever. If problems existed in a well-performing location, the situation in less successful branches could be even worse. Lucas applied for a maintenance job, a position that would allow him to move freely throughout the hotel, interacting with both staff and guests while remaining unnoticed by upper management. Within 48 hours, his application was approved, without so much as a real interview, a red flag in itself. He was handed an employee badge with his fake name and told to report the next morning for his first shift. As he walked through the hotel's back entrance, stepping into a world where no one knew he was the CEO, he braced himself for what he was about to uncover. Lucas arrived at the employee entrance of Meadowbrook Horizon Suites early in the morning, stepping into a world far different from the polished lobbies and pristine suites he was used to seeing in corporate reports. The employee break room was dimly lit, cluttered with discarded paper cups and half-empty snack wrappers. A stark contrast to the luxury his hotel chain promised its guests. The air carried the faint scent of industrial cleaner and stale coffee, and employees shuffled in and out, their expressions ranging from exhausted to indifferent. The first person to acknowledge him was Carla Morales, a veteran housekeeping attendant in her early 60s. Her uniform was crisp, but the deep lines on her face and the way she rubbed her lower back hinted at years of physical strain. She gave him a small, tired smile. "You the new guy?" she asked, barely looking up from refilling her coffee. Lucas, playing his role as Greg, nodded. "Yeah, just trying to figure out where to start." Carla motioned toward a younger worker, Jordan, a bellhop barely in his 20s, who was stacking clean linens in a supply cart. "Stick with him. He'll show you around." As Lucas followed Jordan through the back corridors and service areas, he quickly noticed the chaotic atmosphere. Employees darted around, some moving at a frantic pace, while others slouched from sheer exhaustion. When they reached the main housekeeping station, Lucas spotted a laundry worker manually loading sheets into an outdated, malfunctioning washing machine, sweat beading on his forehead as he struggled with a jammed mechanism. "It does that every morning," Jordan muttered under his breath. "Management says it's too expensive to replace." Lucas frowned. His reports had shown steady profits. Why weren't they reinvesting in basic necessities? Throughout the day, Lucas quietly observed more troubling signs. The kitchen staff in the hotel restaurant worked in near silence, their faces tight with stress. One of the dishwashers, a woman named Denise, was limping slightly, but when another employee offered to cover for her, she shook her head. "Can't afford to lose the hours," she murmured, forcing herself back to work. Lucas also noticed the front desk receptionist handling double the usual number of guests alone, as her coworker had been mysteriously removed from the schedule. "They're cutting ships again," she grumbled under her breath, offering an apologetic smile to an impatient guest. The biggest red flag appeared when Carla, the veteran housekeeper, was approached by the hotel's manager, Travis Holden. He was a tall, sharp-dressed man in his late 40s, carrying a clipboard and an air of superiority. "Carla, I need you to pick up another floor today," he said, not even bothering to ask if she had the energy to do so. Lucas could see the brief flicker of exhaustion in her eyes before she nodded. "Sure thing, sir." As Travis walked away, Jordan muttered, "She's already working a double shift. He does this all the time. She never says no." By the end of the day, Lucas had gathered more than enough evidence that something was deeply wrong. Understaffing, equipment neglect, overworked employees, and an unsympathetic manager who treated his staff like disposable labor. All of it painted a picture of a workplace operating at its breaking point. But Lucas needed to see more before making his move. He would push further, get closer, and uncover exactly how deep the problems ran in his hotel. Lucas had already seen enough warning signs to suspect that Travis Holden, the hotel manager, was at the center of the problem. But it wasn't until later that week that he witnessed just how deep the issues ran. It started during a particularly busy afternoon when a VIP guest arrived unexpectedly, throwing the already overwhelmed front desk into chaos. The lone receptionist, Maya, struggled to keep up as multiple guests demanded her attention. Her hands trembled slightly as she typed into the system, her voice tight with exhaustion. Travis emerged from his office, his usual confident smirk in place. "Maya, what the hell is taking so long?" he barked, his voice carrying across the lobby, causing several guests to glance over uncomfortably. Maya, flustered, tried to explain that the system was lagging and that she was doing her best, but Travis wasn't interested in excuses. He leaned over the desk, lowering his voice but making sure everyone could still hear him. "If you can't keep up, I can find someone who will," he said coldly. Lucas clenched his fists, watching as Maya's face paled, her jaw tightening as she swallowed back whatever she wanted to say. She simply nodded, blinking rapidly as she turned back to her work. Travis sighed dramatically, as if she were nothing more than an inconvenience, before turning on his heel and heading toward the elevators. The incident would have been bad enough on its own, but later that evening, Lucas caught Travis berating the kitchen staff over a minor delay in room service orders. "You people need to move faster," he snapped at Luis, the head chef. ignoring the beads of sweat rolling down the man's forehead. "We don't have time for this nonsense. If you can't get orders out in 15 minutes, I'll start looking for someone who can." Lucas could see the barely contained frustration in Luis's eyes, but the chef just nodded stiffly. Everyone was afraid of speaking up. No one wanted to be the next person Travis threatened to replace. It was becoming painfully clear that this wasn't just a case of a tough boss. Travis had cultivated a culture of fear. The final straw came when Lucas saw Carla struggling to push a heavy housekeeping cart down the hallway. He quickly stepped in to help, but before he could offer, Travis appeared at the end of the hall. "Carla, I need you to cover 3 extra suites tonight," he ordered, without even looking at her. Lucas saw the flicker of pain in Carla's eyes, the hesitation in her movements before she forced a polite smile. "I'll do my best, sir." Travis scoffed. "Yeah, you'd better. We need speed, not excuses." Without waiting for a response, he disappeared into his office, leaving Carla standing there, gripping the handle of the cart with white-knuckled hands. Lucas had seen enough. Travis wasn't just a bad manager, he was actively exploiting his employees, pushing them past their limits while treating them as disposable. Lucas knew it was time to act, no more watching from the sidelines. The moment of reckoning was coming, and Travis had no idea that his biggest mistake was speaking that way in front of the very person who could end his reign of intimidation for good. Lucas had seen enough, but he needed to push things a little further to fully expose how bad the situation had become. He wanted to see how Travis would react when things got truly chaotic. That opportunity came at the peak of the evening rush, when guests flooded the front desk with check-ins, room service orders surged, and the cleaning staff was already stretched to the limit. Maya, still reeling from Travis's earlier scolding, was juggling multiple guest complaints. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she tried to accommodate last-minute reservations and resolve booking errors. Meanwhile, Carla, despite already working a double shift, had been assigned additional suites to clean, leaving her exhausted and visibly struggling. Then it happened. A high-profile guest, furious about his suite not being ready upon arrival, stormed down to the lobby, his voice booming across the polished floors. "This is completely unacceptable. I made this reservation weeks ago, and you're telling me my room isn't available?" Lucas, still undercover as a junior concierge, stood nearby, watching as Maya swallowed her fear and attempted to defuse the situation. "Sir, I completely understand your frustration," she said, forcing a professional tone. "We're working as quickly as possible to ensure your suite is cleaned and ready." But Travis, always eager to assert his dominance, swooped in before Maya could finish. "That's not an excuse," he snapped at her in front of the guest. "This is basic hospitality. If you can't manage it, maybe you're not cut out for this job." Maya's face flushed red with humiliation, her hands trembling as she tried to maintain her composure. Lucas saw it, the breaking point. Across the room, Carla struggled with a heavy cart filled with linens. She had been called to rush the VIP room's cleaning, even though she was already beyond exhausted. As she bent to lift a fresh stack of towels, her knees buckled, and she nearly collapsed under the weight. That's when Travis lost it. "Unbelievable," he muttered, marching toward her. "Carla, if you can't handle the workload, maybe this job isn't for you." Lucas felt something snap inside him. He had seen bad leadership before, but watching Travis publicly berate his exhausted employees was beyond unacceptable. It was cruel. Maya took a deep breath, her voice shaking but determined. "Sir, Carla has been working since early this morning. She hasn't even had a real break." Travis turned on her, his jaw tightening. "And? That's her job. If she wants a paycheck, she needs to keep up." That was it. Lucas stepped forward, his voice calm but laced with authority. "Actually, Travis, I'd like to have a word with you." Travis turned, annoyed. "And who the hell do you—" But Lucas wasn't playing a role anymore. He reached up, removed his disguise, the glasses, the slightly unkempt hair, the lowered posture. He straightened his back, his presence suddenly commanding. For the first time, Travis actually looked at him. Lucas met his gaze, his tone deadly calm. "I think you should know that I'm not just another concierge. I'm Lucas Carter. I own this hotel." The room went completely silent. For a long moment, the hotel lobby was silent, the weight of Lucas Carter's revelation hanging in the air like a thundercloud. Travis stood frozen, his face rapidly cycling through shades of disbelief, shock, and finally, panic. The employees, who had spent months walking on eggshells around him, exchanged wide-eyed glances. Maya gasped softly while Carla, still breathless from exhaustion, clutched the linen cart for support, her expression shifting from shock to something closer to relief. Lucas took a step closer, his voice calm but unyielding. "I've spent the last week working undercover in my own hotel," he said, scanning the faces around him. "I wanted to see firsthand how my employees were treated, and what I found was worse than I could have imagined." His sharp gaze settled on Travis, who swallowed hard, eyes darting around as if searching for an escape. "Let me make this clear," Lucas continued, voice steady. "I saw how you berated Maya for doing her best under impossible circumstances. I saw you overwork Carla to the point of exhaustion, then humiliate her for struggling. And I've spoken to countless employees who have been mistreated, underpaid, and forced to endure your toxic leadership." He let that sink in before adding, "That ends today." Travis let out a weak chuckle, attempting to regain control of the situation. "Look, Mr. Carter, this is all just a misunderstanding. You have to understand, running a hotel requires discipline. If employees can't handle the pressure, that's on them." Lucas didn't flinch. "Discipline," he repeated, his voice dangerously soft. "You call forcing people to work back-to-back shifts without proper breaks discipline? You call humiliating staff in front of customers discipline? That's not discipline, Travis. That's abuse." Travis's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. The employees had begun to gather, forming a quiet but undeniable force behind Lucas. The very people Travis had mistreated were now watching him, waiting for justice. "I want everyone here to hear this," Lucas said, turning slightly to address the room. "Effective immediately, Travis is no longer the manager of this hotel." A wave of stunned silence washed over the staff before whispers of disbelief spread through the crowd. Then slowly the first claps started. At first hesitant, uncertain, then growing, rippling through the employees. It wasn't just applause, it was relief. A few workers nodded to each other, murmuring their approval. Carla, visibly shaking, let out an exhale of pure exhaustion and gratitude. Travis, however, wasn't ready to go down quietly. His face turned red with anger. "You think you can just waltz in here and fire me?" he spat. "I've been running this place for years. You think these people will respect you? They know I'm the one who keeps this place in line." Lucas didn't even blink. "No, Travis, what you did was keep people in fear. And I'm done letting that happen in my business." At that moment, security appeared at the edge of the lobby, already briefed on the situation. Lucas gave them a simple nod. "Escort him out." Travis let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head in disbelief. "You're making a mistake," he muttered, but he knew he had no choice. Security stepped forward, and with one final sneer at the gathered employees, he turned and stormed toward the exit. As the doors swung shut behind him, a different kind of silence filled the lobby, one that wasn't tense or fearful, one that felt light, free. Lucas turned back to the employees, his voice softer now. "I know a lot of you are wondering what happens next," he admitted, "and I won't pretend that everything will change overnight, but what I can promise is that this is just the beginning." He turned to Maya. "You stood up for Carla when no one else would. That's leadership. I'd like you to be part of this hotel's future." Maya's eyes widened, then filled with something that looked a lot like hope. Then he faced Carla. "And you? Take the rest of the day off. Actually, take the next 2 days off, paid. No more working yourself into the ground just to keep up with bad management." Carla's eyes brimmed with tears as she nodded, unable to find the words. Lucas looked at the entire team. From now on, this hotel will be run with fairness and respect. No more abuse of power. No more employees suffering in silence. This time, the applause was loud, genuine, justice had been served. With Travis gone, the real work began. Lucas knew that firing one toxic manager wasn't enough to undo years of damage. The culture of fear and exhaustion that had taken root in the hotel wouldn't disappear overnight. If he wanted to truly restore the values he had built his company on, he needed to listen, learn, and act. Not just for show, but for real, lasting change. The first step was meeting with the employees, really meeting with them. He gathered the entire staff in the hotel's conference room, standing before them not as their CEO, but as someone who had worked alongside them. "I know trust isn't something that can be rebuilt in a single day," he admitted, "but I promise you, I'm here to make sure things get better, not just for a few weeks, but for good." The employees hesitated at first, unsure if they could believe his words, but then, one by one, they spoke up. Maya explained how employees were forced to cover shifts at the last minute, often without notice. Miguel, one of the night janitors, revealed how overtime hours had mysteriously disappeared from his paycheck more than once. Carla, still exhausted but cautiously hopeful, shared how she and others had been repeatedly denied proper breaks, sometimes working 12-hour shifts with barely a chance to sit down. Lucas took notes. He asked questions. He didn't interrupt. For too long, the employees had been made to feel small, like they didn't matter. That ended today. The changes came swiftly. Payroll was overhauled, every missing hour of overtime was repaid, and moving forward, a transparent tracking system was implemented to ensure no employee was ever cheated again. Scheduling policies were restructured. Employees were now given at least a week's notice for their shifts, and last-minute schedule changes required employee consent. Break policies were strictly enforced. No more skipping meals or standing for hours without relief. But Lucas knew that policy changes alone weren't enough. He needed the right people in leadership, people who actually cared. Standing before the staff, he turned to Lisa, the assistant manager. "You've been running this place while Travis sat in his office, haven't you?" She hesitated but nodded. "Then, I'd like you to step in as the new general manager." Lisa's eyes widened. "Me?" "You've already been doing the job," Lucas said simply. "It's time you got the title and the paycheck to match." A murmur of approval rippled through the crowd, but Lucas wasn't finished. "And I'm creating a hotel employee advisory board, representatives from every department, housekeeping, kitchen, front desk, will meet with me personally each month. No more decisions made without hearing from the people actually doing the work." For the first time, the employees didn't just listen, they believed. And as they left that meeting, heads held higher than before, Lucas knew that this wasn't just about fixing one hotel. It was about rebuilding everything his company was meant to be. Lucas knew that fixing one hotel was just the beginning. If Horizon Hospitality had allowed a toxic culture to flourish in a single location, chances were that other branches faced the same problems. To ensure that what had happened at the Grand Horizon Hotel never happened again, Lucas launched a company-wide audit, sending teams to every location unannounced to evaluate working conditions, employee treatment, and managerial practices. The results were alarming. At least a third of the hotels had issues similar to those at the Grand Horizon: managers abusing their power, employees overworked and underpaid, and a culture that prioritized numbers over people. Determined to correct these systemic failures, Lucas overhauled leadership across the company. Problematic managers were fired, while hardworking and ethical employees, many of whom had been overlooked for years, were promoted to leadership roles. Leadership training became mandatory for all managers, with a heavy emphasis on employee well-being, fair scheduling, and ethical business practices. New regional oversight teams were formed to conduct random employee check-ins, ensuring that every location operated according to the company's original values. A company-wide employee feedback system was also introduced, allowing workers to anonymously report concerns without fear of retaliation. To encourage transparency, Lucas implemented quarterly town hall meetings, where employees at all levels could speak directly to corporate leadership about ongoing challenges and areas for improvement. The most impactful reform came in the form of better pay and benefits. Many employees, like Evelyn, had been working full-time hours without full-time benefits. Lucas restructured the employment classification system, ensuring that anyone consistently working over 30 hours per week was automatically upgraded to a full-time status with healthcare, paid time off, and retirement contributions. Raises were also issued to long-term employees, rewarding loyalty instead of taking advantage of it. The transformation wasn't easy. Some longtime corporate executives resisted the changes, arguing that these policies would increase labor costs. But Lucas remained firm. A company is only as strong as the people who keep it running. If we don't take care of our employees, we don't deserve to succeed. 6 months later, the impact was undeniable. Employee turnover dropped, morale improved, and customer satisfaction soared. Horizon Hospitality wasn't just recovering, it was thriving. And for the first time in years, Lucas knew his company had returned to what it was always meant to be, a place where both employees and customers felt valued. 6 months after Lucas first stepped undercover into the Grand Horizon Hotel, he returned, not as a trainee, but as the CEO who had taken action to rebuild his company's foundation. This time, the atmosphere was different. Employees moved with a renewed sense of purpose, no longer burdened by fear or exhaustion. The hotel's front desk, once a place of tension and frustration, now radiated warmth as staff greeted guests with genuine smiles. In the housekeeping department, employees worked efficiently not because they were being pressured, but because they were now fairly compensated and treated with respect. Lucas made his way to the break room, where employees were gathered for their scheduled morning briefing. He spotted Eveline, the longtime housekeeper whose struggle had first caught his attention. This time, she didn't look drained. She looked content, strong, and most importantly, secure. "I told you things would change," Lucas replied, "and I meant it." The room fell silent as employees listened, waiting to see what he would say next. "What we've built here isn't just a temporary fix," Lucas continued. "This is the new standard: fair wages, respect, and a company that values the people who make it successful." A ripple of applause spread through the room, small at first, then growing louder. It wasn't just about gratitude, it was hope, finally restored. The fear that had once plagued the hotel was gone, replaced by something stronger: pride in their work, trust in their leadership, and faith in a future where they mattered. For the first time in years, Lucas knew his company was finally on the right path. As Lucas stood in the heart of the Grand Horizon Hotel, watching his employees work with renewed energy, he reflected on the lessons this journey had taught him. True leadership wasn't about profits, numbers, or corporate strategies. It was about people. A business could not thrive if its foundation was built on exploitation and fear. It was the employees, the housekeepers, the receptionists, the kitchen staff, who kept the company running, and they deserved to be treated with dignity, respect, and fairness. The undercover experience had been a wake-up call, but what mattered most was what came after. Lucas didn't just fire a bad manager and adjust some policies, he transformed the entire company culture to ensure fairness, transparency, and accountability. His story became a reminder to business leaders everywhere: you cannot manage what you do not understand. Stepping down from the top and seeing the reality on the ground was the only way to truly fix what was broken. As Lucas prepared to leave, Evelyn approached him one last time. "You did good," she said with a nod. Lucas smiled. "No, we did." And with that, he left, knowing that for the first time in years his company was finally built to last. The story of Lucas going undercover in his own company teaches a vital lesson about true leadership and corporate responsibility. It highlights the dangers of becoming disconnected from the reality of frontline employees and how unchecked management can foster a toxic work environment. Lucas learned that a company is only as strong as the people who keep it running, and when employees are overworked, underpaid, and mistreated, the entire business suffers. By stepping into their world, he saw firsthand the struggles they faced: managers abusing power, unfair wages, and employees too afraid to speak up. His journey proved that leadership isn't about sitting in an office making decisions based on reports. It's about understanding and acting on the needs of the people who work for you. The biggest takeaway? Culture starts at the top. If a company prioritizes profits over people, it creates an environment of fear and exploitation. But when employees feel valued and respected, they work harder, take pride in their jobs, and drive success. Lucas's story serves as a powerful reminder that ethical leadership isn't just the right thing to do, it's the key to building a business that lasts.